Okay, there we go. Let me know if you don't see that.
We can see it.
Fantastic. All right, well, I'm ready to roll when you all are, if the chair wants to open the work session.
All right, let's call this meeting to order.
Awesome.
And we usually begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, so let's go ahead and do that. Formal meeting. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, it's all yours, Janet.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for having me on a Saturday morning. Really appreciate everyone for showing up. We are going to be just going over the board self-evaluation results. Thank you to everyone who completed that survey. I really appreciate it. I know it was during the winter break, and I hope everybody was able to get some rest and enjoy some winter break time. So I'm going to get us started here. I just wanted to kind of give a little bit of an overview. And I talked about this when I did the training with you all, which I think was in May. Can't believe we're already in the new year. Why you should evaluate your performance as a board. And really, it's because I know, because I've worked with lots of boards, I've been with OSBA for over 4 years, but the research shows how your work really impacts students, right? It's your actions, your behaviors. And so you don't know what you don't know. And so it's important to assess your performance so that you're able to then identify those areas of strength and so that you can maintain those strengths, but then also identify areas of growth so that you can learn and grow and take the trainings that you need to be able to improve. Because ultimately you're impacting your work. Impact students. So really this survey is an accountability tool. So just like we tell boards, you need to evaluate the superintendent's performance, you should also evaluate your own performance as well and hold each other accountable for how you operate as a board. And this will help. I really encourage today, it's going to be an interactive session. And I'm going to be facilitating and guiding you all to kind of have those open and honest conversations. This is your opportunity to, again, address those areas and find out how you can improve. What can you do? And we're going to talk about what that looks like at the end of the session. And ultimately, it's so, again, you can impact students and achieve student success. So just really briefly, today we're going to be evaluating your performance and determining what to do with that information. That's really it in a nutshell. Again, identify what's working, not working, have some open dialogue. You're the experts in the room. So the data is great, but sometimes, we want to make sure, and we do this session to ensure that the data results are aligning with what you're experiencing and what's happening in the board. So you're the experts in the room. And so I am going to be opening it up to you all here in a moment. But I'm here again to facilitate, guide you. I'm going to give you an analysis of the results as well. And then whether or not it's aligning or resonating with your work and what's truly happening in the boardroom. Okay, so now I'm going to open it up to you all, and I would love to, again, you're the experts in the room. How many of you, just raise of hands, had a chance to look over the results?
So I need to first start with apologizing to everyone because I thought we were doing the assessment today. So I did not take it. So I am behind and I apologize.
No worries. You're going to have opportunity to chime in. So no worries. And thank you for your honesty and transparency. It's anonymous, even to myself.
Just looking at it.
No, and that's totally okay. I know that I also sent it just like 48 hours in advance and we're all super busy. So I am happy to give you like 5 minutes to look over and then we can go into group questions. Would that help? To give you just like 5 minutes to glance over and look at the results. I know Stephanie provided copies.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Were these results originally on a color graph?
Yes.
Do you
My
possibly
suggestion.
have the results also that you could screen share? Because we have black and white copies and my eyes are old and blind.
Yeah, the
yes,
gradient
and
is
so-
difficult to discern.
Yeah,
of course. Yes. So here, I will pull up the report.
I thought it was.
I can do that.
So
So
I did my 15-year-old's eye on this.
do you
She
want
tried
me
for
to
a
just
moment.
do, so I can start here. Can everybody see this?
all we see is group questions.
Hold on. I probably have to stop sharing. Give me a second. Let me pull that up again. Oh, here we go. I have a lot of monitors, so let me share.
Kind of cadence, but you gotta be able to see.
No, you're good. All right, so I'm gonna pull up screen. Okay, here we go.
Maybe we could print it out.
Okay. So
Oh, there it is.
We got it.
can y'all see that? Okay. So I'll leave this up here and then I can just give you all a couple minutes to look at this. And then maybe you can go through the other pages or I can also scroll down as well.
Thank you. I'm with Bob. I'm going up to look at it.
Okay.
Of course. And I can zoom in a little bit more if that helps. And I can just go down when you're ready to go to the other standards.
So the red was the.
Yeah, so the green is accomplished, blue is effective, yellow is developing, and red is ineffective. Correct.
It's a great one. It's great.
On the scale, Janet, is red accomplished, yellow effective, developing blue, and ineffective green?
No, so it is the green is accomplished. So
Mhm.
essentially what that means is like you're excelling, you're like the model for other boards in terms of that standard and your performance for that standard.
Gotcha.
Blue shade is effective. So the green and blue is where you kind of want to land, right? In terms
Okay.
of performance.
And
Yellow
then
is
yellow developing.
correct. Yep. And then
Thank
red
you.
is ineffective. Mhm.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Yeah. And we'll dive into some specific questions and I will let you know kind of the shaded areas and the colors too, since you have it in black and white. So it'll be helpful. But yeah, take a look at those results, maybe go through the other pages and then we'll open it up for a group discussion. I'll give you a couple more minutes.
Janet, on the detail pages, are the colors on the little bar charts in the same order as the key up on the top? Like the ineffective is on the right side? I'm just trying to charts.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to kind of see. Yes, so the red is going to be on the furthest to the right side, correct?
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and I can flip through some of these pages too. So I'll just go one by one so you can kind of take a look. You got my key though, so I've highlighted some and we're going to be discussing them here in a bit. And I'll go slow. I'll just go through each page. You're ready. And I'm just showing.
Hold on just a second. Yeah, let me catch up here.
No worries.
Okay. Beyond policies.
It's just kind of looking, and we're going to be diving into some specific areas. Just kind of looking at a glance. So here, right, it's kind of mixed. So you could maybe write mixed just to kind of help you as a key for this standard 6. And that's page 17. Standard 7, you're kind of in the blue mostly blue and yellow, so developing and effective. Again, mostly blue and yellow. For standard 8, you have a few mixed, but again, mostly in the blue and yellow. Again, blue and yellow. Standard 9, similar pattern, but there's a few mixed, and we'll dive into those mixed responses questions. That's going to be my, I'll give you an analysis there. Again, blue and yellow. Standard 10, similar, a lot of more on the yellow. So developing with a few mixed responses as well. Standard 11, seeing a lot of blue and green and a few yellow. Blue and green, blue and green.
Can you go back to page 26 real quick? I'm sorry,
Yeah.
it's really hard when we are looking for colors and ours are black and white
No,
and
you're
gray.
good. You're good. I will also say, and we're going to have that discussion too, kind of, I know you all took the training with me, roles and responsibility, and I hope that some of those keywords stood out and and you kind of remember, and we'll do more of a recap again if needed, what these standards entails, because we dove into all of those in May, all of these standards, and that's what the assessment is tied to the standards that we went through.
Are you guys ready for to go to 27?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Page 27.
You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
Next page, please.
Mm-hmm. Still standard 11 here.
Okay.
Ready?
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course. And the last standard, standard 12.
Thank you so much for that.
Of course. No, happy to help. So I'm going to go back to those group questions now. And again, we're going to have time to continue these conversations and dive deeper, but just kind of at a glance, and as you were going through those pages, what did you observe about the data? What stood out to you? And anyone can share at this moment. We can do kind of popcorn style.
It seemed there were some questions where we were really unified or very close. And then there were interestingly some where we're completely, I think there was at least one where everybody had a different answer. So it would be interesting to understand whether we're all seeing different parts of the same thing or interpreting the same information differently on those.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Seems like there were fewer where everyone agreed than there were where everyone disagreed. There was more where people were seeing the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Anything else you noticed?
Fair amount of tendency to the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Thank heavens there wasn't a fifth choice.
And we'll talk about that, right? Like how maybe sometimes it can even be how the question was interpreted, right? And so that's why we have this facilitated discussion to make sure again that the results are aligning how you understood the question or how the work or what does that standard mean, etc.
So
Anyone else? Yeah, go ahead.
as I look through this and I think about the work we're doing with teachers in professional development, we talk a lot about actionable items, not just talking about the theory, but what can we actually put in place that's an action to get something done, not just admire the problem. And in looking at the answers that relate to like on the ground work and how does the board and how does the relationship between superintendent and board really get to something that's actionable rather than talking about it, going through the motions of the meeting and what boards need to do, but how do they actually become involved as OSBA shares is critical and we know is critical. How do they get involved? How do I do my work to help involve them? Because that's a struggle for me too. I work with staff every day. We have our initiatives. I have a board meeting once a month, but what can we do to have more actionable items that really impact what we do at school rather than just talking about it? And how does that process happen? Because we talk about how important it is, but what are the things that we can actually do that are actions? Is that fair?
Yeah, no, that's great. And we will talk about that. And I have some guidance, if you all agree at the end, kind of what are some steps you can do. So what are you going to do with this information, right? What are some actionable items? Yep. Some strategies that you can implement. Yep. Great. If there's no any other things that you just kind of at a glance, we'll talk about interpretations here in a moment. But anything else, otherwise I'll move on and to the next questions. But I want to give everybody an opportunity to chime in and encourage everyone to participate in today's work session. Okay. So overall, looking at the results, but also again, you're the experts in the room. Overall, what are the strengths and areas of improvement for the board? What would you say are the strengths?
I feel like the board represents a good cross-section of the community that is involved in the school, between previous staff members, people who are involved in other aspects of education, parents, and other educators.
Yeah. Anyone else?
It seemed like looking at the results that standard 11, that board member conduct, ethics, and relationship was a really strong area for us.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We all agreed on.
What else?
Fairly spread out in the community engagement, as opposed to being more in agreement.
Yeah.
By spread out, you mean like mixed responses and community engagement standard?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. Great.
And the standard 3, it seemed like we were lower, which kind of got to what Erin was describing of what does the board have as actionable items that we need to roll rather than just sitting in meetings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What can you do in your leadership role? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Great. Anything else to add for strengths or areas of improvement?
Well, I think that one of our strengths when I'm looking through at standard 9, and no one marked it as accomplished, but everybody agreed that we're effective on being solution oriented. And so I think that's a very positive thing about the board is that, we're willing to admit that there are still things to be worked on, but everybody is in agreement that, we're working on a solution together.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll start to see the standards kind of overlap as well. And we're going to look at that. I'm going to show you different areas where there was a lot of agreement, and you can see the connections of the accuracy and the results. But again, I'll make sure, and I'll ask you all if that is resonating and that is correct. The results are reflecting what is happening with the board operations and your work. Yeah.
I guess I was a little bit, well, first of all, when I was taking the survey, I was startled, that's the right word, to see standard 10 that included innovation and creativity, because it had been sort of my impression that there wasn't a lot of room for innovation and creativity in our work. It seems like in many cases, we're so locked into what you can do and what you can't do that the idea that you would even try to be innovative or creative about something seemed to kind of, not really get a lot of emphasis. So,
And that's a section that I think ties in with what I shared before, is those, we go through the roles and responsibilities and the very clear pieces about board work and what school work. And it always seems to blur those lines when we talk about an actionable item or moving forward with something, as Bob is talking about. And so how that happens without blurring the lines, that's
Right.
question me as well.
Yep. And that one kind of really ties to standard 1, and we'll talk more about that. And that's really, boards should be having time to reflect and have that time to think innovatively and creatively. A lot of times during your regular board business meetings, it's just like business, right? You don't have a lot of time and flexibility to have those deep, rich dialogues. And so spending and carving out specific things for work sessions so that you can do more of that. But then again, also tying it to your role, which is, for example, making sure how the district goals are aligning. That is the role of the superintendent to implement those district goals, but you as a board do have to set that direction and give guidance on what that looks like. So you don't per se implement it, right? And determine the how, but you do define what does success mean and setting up that direction. And so that's a really good example of something that the board could do actionable that ties into impacting students and ties to collaborating with the superintendent.
So defining what makes something effective, and then also beyond that is, what is the measure going to be to show that you've met that?
Yep, exactly. Yep. Yeah. Anything else? Y'all are hitting at some really good areas, and we're going to dive deeper into standard 10 in particular, standard 1, and a couple others.
go for it.
Okay. So then I just want to ask the group if there's any questions that you have after looking at the data to either each other or to me as your facilitator. Any clarifying questions? Okay. All right, so I'm going to give you my data analysis as your facilitator of what I saw in the results, and making sure again that there's alignment, and ask you questions, and please pause me at any time if I'm going too fast or I need to clarify anything. This is your time to really learn together, grow together. So for the aggregated data results, at a glance, right, we tend to just want to look at the red, right, for ineffective. But really, it's important to kind of pay attention to also kind of where you're landing in terms of the green and the blue shaded areas. And again, this is kind of like your baseline. This is your first time taking this assessment with us. And so if you were to take this, and we do encourage boards to take this assessment at least every other year, you will get to compare the results against these results. So if you were to take it in 2026 or 2027, you'll get to see, and hopefully you would see, because we're going to be addressing those areas that need improvement and those areas of strength so you can maintain them, you would hopefully see those shaded areas growing in the green and or in the blue areas and shrinking the yellow. However, there are some factors sometimes, and so that's what's important to have this discussion, because I know it's an election year this year, things can change, right? And so there isn't really, this is a really important tool to just have. And so that's why we say every other year, and to have this discussion so that you can address, because maybe the standards, the areas are going to change because you have different board members, et cetera. But again, it's a really great accountability tool to use. So given that, your overall strengths, which some of you already kind of mentioned, and this is ranked, not a numerical order, that's on purpose. It's ranked by the order of your strongest, and these were the top 3. So your strongest came out to be standard 11, which some of you already called out, around board member conduct, ethics, and the relationship with the superintendent. And then after that, your next strongest was standard 7, the culture and climate. If you remember, I talked a lot about this in May when we did the roles and responsibilities training. That's really just, you maintain a positive culture, how you deliberate and make decisions, team solution oriented, as somebody called out. This is really showing up, and I'm starting to see that alignment, that the results is aligning with what we just discussed here a moment ago. And then your last, in terms of the top 3 strengths, is standard 12, budgeting and accountability, which again, your role and responsibility, all of these standards matter. But in terms of this one, it's knowing your oversight role with the budget, and how to tie it back to the district goals, and how resources are being allocated tied to ensuring that the district goals are being met. So I want to go into some specific strengths. So if you have your report, and I can pull up the other report as well, so we can look at the shaded areas. In particular, I wanted to just highlight some of those areas for those strengths. And we kind of already discussed some of them. But if you go to question 49, which is on standard 7, page 18, you'll see again, it's all green and blue. There was 1 green response and then 3 blue responses. So again, you have trust and respect for each other. Very collaborative group. That came out as well. If you go to question 72, that's around standard 11, which was your top strength. A lot of blue and green area there as well. And so then the other thing too, I wanted to call out, if we go back to standard 7, the board models and holds the district responsible for improving a culture of service. So you, again, we're really strong in your culture and climate, and making sure that that goes through the pipeline into the district. And that's on page 19. That question 54, if you go to page 19, was all blue. All of you responded as effective. Okay. If you go to question 74, again, that's going back now to standard 11. I want to highlight another couple things, because again, this is how, this is what the results showed, that you do understand your roles and responsibilities, that, makes sense, especially because you did that training. So that's fantastic. You understand that things in executive session are confidential. A lot of green and blue area all across the board. This one is really important, and I want to highlight it. Question 75, and kind of give you all kudos. If you go to page 27, again, on standard 11, you don't use your office for personal gain or advancement. You really are focusing on how to improve, you're focusing on all your students. And so whether you have, what this one entails really is whether you have some passion, or like if you have kiddos in the district and you have insight into certain things, you're kind of removing that hat and really focusing on how the decisions you are making are impacting all of the students. Question 76, again, you know the roles and responsibilities of the board. You know that you cannot speak on behalf of the board unless you have the authority to do so. So that was on page 27, green and blue. And then, as I mentioned, standard 12 is really strong too, and that's around the budget aligning with the district goals. So I'm just trying to show you specifically in the report where this showed up as a strength. Everyone following along? Okay, fantastic. So now let's talk about your areas of improvement, which we started to kind of touch on when we were discussing here as a group. Standard 1, vision directed planning. And again, these are not in numerical order. They're ranked from your highest areas of improvement to the least. Standard 10, innovation creativity, which was also mentioned a moment ago. And then standard 3, effective leaders. What I will say about standard 3, it was more, it got ranked as an area of improvement, but it's actually more in the developing area. And I'll show you kind of, and that's why it's kind of ranked in the lowest there for areas of improvement. But it's still an area that, which we also talked about, you want to address as well. Okay, so specific areas of improvement. So, you talked, I think somebody mentioned, right, there's a lot of involvement with stakeholders, I think somebody said, and this is an area where it showed up that you are visible in the community, but that there may be room for where you could, and again, I'm asking the group because for this particular question around collaborating with the community to establish district goals, which is tied to community engagement, if you go to question 5, there was a lot of mixed responses. So you had 2 blue, so 2 that reported as effective, 1 developing, and 1 red. So that tells me that some of you are thinking that you are collaborating enough, but and some are disagreeing, right? So there's some disagreement there. And again, pause me and let me know if that's resonating with you or not. Board members can clearly articulate the vision and strategic goals of the district. Most of you reported that took the survey as developing there. If you go to page 4, there was 1 red. And what I'll say about this, oftentimes, and this goes back to what we were starting to discuss about actionable steps that you can take. Boards do set the direction for the district. They have, help develop the strategic goals, and they get posted somewhere, but then the piece around monitoring it or ensuring they're being met gets missed at times. And this is what I see oftentimes with a lot of boards. And so that's an area where you can take within your role as a board, an actionable step to how are you helping ensure that those goals are being met. And we can discuss that if that's an area that you want to address after tonight. The board creates space. So this is around innovation. We kind of started to talk about this. So if you go to page 68 and if you go to page 24, question 68 and 69, that is particularly around standard 10, innovation and creativity. And there is a lot of mixed responses. So in particular, in those 2 questions, if you're looking at them as I'm talking, they both were responded. There were the same results, 2 blue, so 2 ineffective. 1 person said it was developing, and then 1 person said it was ineffective. So again, making sure that there's that space and you're creating, you're carving out time for work sessions to dive deeper into some specific areas. The next one, the board builds and leverages relationships with community leaders. So that is page 9. And so that's kind of really understanding the board's advocacy role, and that is tied to standard 3 as well. And again, a lot of developing area, but there was 1 response that said ineffective. And then again, if you go to question 24 around advocacy, and it shows a similar pattern. There was 3 in the developing and 1 ineffective. So what do you think? Is that kind of aligning with what we discussed after going over those areas of growth and areas of improvement? I'm seeing a lot of hot nodding heads. Okay. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk about that I get to see as I'm analyzing the data is I get to look at an incongruence report, and it lets me look specifically at areas where there was less agreement. And so really that's where you're going to see a lot of different colored shaded. So it's going to be mostly mixed responses. And those areas were standard 6, culture responsiveness, standard 2, community engagement. I'm highlighting that because that ties in a lot with what I'm seeing for areas of improvement overall. Standard 4, accountability. And then also get to look at areas where there's more agreement. And just because there's more agreement doesn't necessarily mean that you're all agreeing that everything is going great, or that it's an area that needs improvement. It really depends. In your case, you all had a lot of agreement around mostly effective and developing for these particular areas, which was standard 7, culture and climate, which makes sense because you mostly were effective in that area. And that was a strength that I mentioned earlier. Standard 9, systems thinking, and then standard 3, effective leadership, which I mentioned had a lot of developing, a lot of yellow if you go to that standard. But let's dive a little bit deeper. So specific areas of less agreement. So if you go to page 16, question 44 around standard 6, culture responsiveness, there was 3 yellow and 1 red. And so that is really around how does the board, when they're making decisions or reviewing policies, kind of apply that culture responsive lens. And so to me, that ties back to that one question that I mentioned earlier around, which you rated really highly on as effective, around, making sure that when you're making decisions, you're focusing it and how it's impacting the system as a whole, how it's impacting all of the students. So it's similar thing to and in order to do that, you need to know the makeup of your students. You need to look at data so that you're making sure that whatever decisions you are making is how is it impacting all of your students, and considering all the different factors, socioeconomic factors, students in special needs, etc. So that's really what that question is about. And so you landed there in the mostly developing. We talked about vision directed planning, that's standard 1. So if you go to question 12 on page 6, district goals are collaboratively developed with the community. There was a lot of mixed responses. I want to pause there and just kind of ask where you're at with your district goals. Usually boards will start the process from the beginning when the strategic plan is over, and strategic plans usually last 3 to 4 years. So I'm just curious if you have already a strategic plan in place, when you start a new one, that's an opportunity where you can do some meaningful community engagement where you include all your stakeholders to kind of help you with that process. That's a really actionable step 2, where it's the job of the board to create that direction and those district goals, but to do it in a collaborative way so that you are addressing and defining student success and what are your student needs in your district. And then similarly, if you go to question 31 on page 12, how is the data tied to district goals? What data have you looked at to define those district goals? And then board establishes goals for itself. You're going to be doing that tonight. And so we saw some mixed responses, but you're going to be addressing that today. That's how you're holding yourselves accountable. And so that was an area where there was some less agreement, but you're shifting in, I think, that developing effective area after today. How is that resonating with folks? Okay. So specific areas of more agreement. So for this, if you go to page 18, this is tied to standard 10, question 50. A lot of yellow. There was a lot of developing because that's where you had a lot of agreement with the developing area for this particular standard. The board takes time to reflect and improve relationships. And so we already talked about that. We know that's maybe an area where there's room for improvement. The board encourages creative processes, right? We talked a little bit about that as well. That's tied to standard 10. The board team is solution oriented. I'm glad to hear that that one was mentioned because I also saw it as well. And that's on page 23. That's tied to your strongest strength, which was standard 11. And then board members are visible in the community. If you go to page 8, so that's community engagement standard 2, a lot of developing area there too. So, which isn't bad. If you see a lot of yellow, that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but you do want to address and move it and shift it to effective. But again, you don't know what you don't know. And so kudos to all of you for doing this survey, because this is kind of your baseline and this is going to guide you and help you to improve those areas. All right, so overall, this is what I would say are your areas of strength and areas of growth. We already talked about standard 11, standard 12, and standard 3 I mentioned is a bit more on the developing area, I would say, but still I would call it and classify it as a strength. For your areas of growth, standard 1, vision directed planning. I would say standard 2, community engagement, and then standard 3, innovation and creativity. So really it's kind of, like I mentioned, right? Having time to reflect on these other pieces like community engagement, if you want to address that, or vision directed planning.
Janet, are we going to have access to this, what you're sharing on the screen?
Yeah, I can send it to you all. Yeah, I can send it to Stephanie so she can share it with the board.
Thank
Absolutely. Happy to do that after the meeting. Okay, so now my question to you all is, what do you want to do with this information? What specific area do you want to dive in and start to do some actionable steps on? I usually tell boards pick 1 or 2, so that way you don't get overwhelmed. And also, again, right, we talked about carving out time and making it meaningful. And so I always tell boards to pick 1 or 2 areas. These are some possible areas, but after, hearing the results, and I can go back to that chart, you can kind of decide if there's something else that you would want to prioritize. So here are some possible board professional development goal areas. I say that because these are not your district goals. This assessment is so that you can improve your performance as a board. So we call them board goals. So here are some possible areas, maybe focusing on standard 2, community engagement, understanding your role as a board with advocacy and community engagement. We actually have some really great webinars around what does it mean? How can you advocate? Our legislative team actually just did these 2 webinars recently in December and November. And so that would be a really good opportunity if that's an area you want to address. Maybe you also set aside a work session around community engagement and have a discussion around what does that look like? How can we be a bit more collaborative and engage with the community while still maintaining and being in our role as a board? So that kind of goes with collaborating with stakeholders to develop the district goals. Again, not sure where you're at in the process with your district goals, or if you're even, if you've set like a monitoring plan to measure or have a system. So you could also maybe dive deep into that. And what does that look like? Do a training around that. So that would address your standard 1 and 2. And then overall, in terms of that standard 10, hold work sessions or maybe even listening sessions to learn and reflect about district initiatives, look at data tied to the district goals, look at the results, again, tied to the district goals. Thoughts? What do you want to do with this information?
Well, we did just still fairly recently, it was just towards the end of last year, settled on a final print version of what our district goals were. So I think we probably are at a point where we need to be looking at, okay, other than, as she said, other than it being a poster we stick on a wall someplace, how do we make this, a living, happening thing.
And from those goals, then I developed the strategic plan, which I'm trying to put into a one-page version instead of a 14-page that nobody will ever look at or read. That addresses your goals, that also ties in with our work on our vision for readiness that the staff are doing, and hoping to dovetail those three pieces: board goals, strategic plan, and then the professional development work around the lily pads and our progress towards readiness. If we tie those three things together, I think we have a cohesive piece between board, administration, and the staff that are putting everything into play.
Well, I kind of am along there too. I'm a goal-oriented person, to be honest, and to me, if we're working at our goals, it gives us a focus that we're not being sidetracked by, let's do this task, and they don't have anything to do with our goals. And so it's kind of a meaningless use of time in some ways. I mean, not that there isn't things that would come out of those tasks, but to have at least a focus, especially since we're all so new at being board members, that would be my input.
Well, I see up there, and this is, you know, I'm somewhat on the side. We work together, but this is for you as the board. But I see there advocating with community engagement, collaborating with stakeholders. That's all, you know, getting out in front of the community and finding out what are their priorities and how that fits in with your goals, and help you develop, alter goals in the future. But we have community engagement that continues to happen with our integrated guidance programs, high school success, SAA, all those state grant dollars. So we have requirements there. We are going to be, you know, looking at the viability of a bond next November, which takes an incredible amount of community engagement. We've got a long-range planning committee that is finishing up their initial work, and that is all going to tie into more community outreach and input meetings. So that being an area for you all to develop would tie in really well with trying to get that outreach for important things that we have to do, for hoops we have to jump through with ODE that, sorry, I don't feel are that important, but we have to do them. But the more critical piece is how we move forward with that long-range planning for facilities, and then continuing to get input on what happens inside the four walls of the facilities. So that would, seeing that and thinking from my standpoint, that is something that if we can figure out how to dovetail some work and actionable items, that would be an area I would love to see as at least part of your focus.
And I think that.
And I hope I didn't overstep what I'm supposed to do, Janet.
No, you're talking about setting up some systems, which is what I was going to ask. And it's sounding like needing a monitoring plan, because it sounds to me that you have the district goals, right? You've created a strategic plan, Erin, and you're going to make that just a little bit more synthesized, like in a one-pager, to show kind of how those goals are being implemented.
And then starting the sharing out process, because that's critical, not just have it be a paper.
Exactly. And so that's the last piece, which sometimes gets missed. Like, I've worked with a lot of boards, and so just so you know, you're not alone, is that last piece that we like to call a monitoring plan, of how those goals, how the board is measuring those goals and making sure that they're being met. It's not looking at every single thing in the strategic plan, but picking out one thing that shows that progress is being made. So the board stays really focused on getting progress on that, and then they're able to then share that out to the community, because they can discuss then afterwards, you know, after they have you would give them that information, like, here's where we're at. You can bring in, if you want, staff also to give a report on like where we are in the progress of this specific district goal area, and depending on what area the board wants to focus on. But it's really a system, a process, a monitoring plan that just kind of helps the board stay focused, really make sure that progress is being made on those goals. Yep. So it's like prioritizing specific areas instead of being like, well, what's happening with this in the plan? What's happening with this in the plan? And that's your job, right? But then you can give a more high level kind of, explanation of what's happening with those goals.
We can get so caught up in the everyday decision making, voting on this, approving that, whatever, that we don't ever, that we spend more time with that, I guess is what I'm trying to say, than we do with the standard 10 thing, which would be at some point reflecting, okay, we've spent 3/4 of a year doing the routine business. Are we getting anywhere? We need to have work sessions or times when specifically that's what we're doing is, okay, what is the data we can collect? What data is out there? What does it say about our efforts towards our goals? Do we need to let a goal go because we've got it whooped and replace it with something else, or data show we need to try harder, or whatever.
And I think that's an important piece too, is, there's so many different things that happen at school. And you could ask a question about one specific program and there could be 100 different directions that I could provide you data or answers. So as you look through what's the highest priorities for you as a group and the board, that can help direct your questions for what you want me to bring to you and share, to show how we're making progress, or to show and share what the initiatives are that we're putting in place or we're working on putting in place. Just gives me more specific detail, because there are 100 different aspects to every single thing that we do. And it's impossible for me or us to share all of that with you. But it is important that we start sharing more of that and you get what you need in order to make your decisions as board members.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, I know when I put a lot of thought, and I actually don't remember which way I went on it. I think I went with yellow when it talks about the community engagement. Because I think that we are moving forward on community engagement. And I keep thinking of the long term, Erin is talking about a bond measure. And I think that our community engagement has really shown some progress and some success in having like parents coming to school events and parents being involved in the school events. We're showing progress in the community business partners in regards to, a lot of our elective classes and things like that. But I also look at what now I'm seeing as a more long-term thing of putting a bond issue up. I think that there are still groups of people within the community that we need to get engaged with the school, because they're going to be voting on a bond that's going to be supporting our school. And I'm not sure, I don't know the answer of how to get them engaged, because it's not that the school isn't putting out invitations and inviting them to like our goal setting input things and stuff like that. I think the school is inviting them, but they're not choosing also to come and participate or give their input. And so I do think that that would be something that if we are serious about putting something out as a bond, that we need to have time in a work session to really discuss what we see as some of the barriers that is having those people not be involved, what we can do as things to help lessen those barriers, what we could do to be more welcoming if we're not perceived as welcoming. And so things like that, I think, are things that are going to take some time, and it may take more than one meeting. It may be something that is an ongoing thing where, we do a little bit of work and then we reflect on it and go forward again. And so that's one of the things I look about and think about is that, what we're gonna do on that. And then when it comes to the board meetings, you know, yes, there's business of the board that has to be done, but also as the current chair, you know, I sometimes would appreciate input because, you know, the meetings when I first came on the board were very quick. They generally lasted a half hour, and it really was, you go through the agenda, you do the business, and the meeting was over. And our meetings have become longer. Usually now they're about an hour to an hour and a half. And I would appreciate feedback on the flow of the meeting. Like, you know, would you prefer me to shorten discussion and move the meeting along and have it last an hour, or, you know, a time frame? Or, you know, do you want to have that where we sit and we're having the conversations and things like that? And how long do you want the board meetings to last? And I'm not saying that sometimes they're going to be long anyway, because there's business to take care of, but there is a manner of flow in the board meeting where, you know, conversations can be a little bit shorter, or I could say, hey, do we need to have a work session on this? And things like that to better facilitate the timing and how the whole meeting goes. So I don't even know if that's really on topic, but it kind of is, you know, are we
Well,
gonna
it can
have?
be, you know, it can be a work session, right? What I'm hearing is like parliamentary procedure, maybe having a refresher on that, or and it doesn't have to necessarily be a work session. You could also watch a webinar. You could also, there's a lot of different avenues, so you don't feel like it's always a meeting. But what I do tell boards is if you do watch a webinar, because you do that on your own time, reflect on it together as a group, so that you can see what lessons were learned, or how, that's what I always encourage is if you do one of those options, just reflect on it at a board meeting, so that you can all be on the same page of what you heard in the webinar and how you're going to take some of those tools and implement them. Yeah, no, absolutely. That ties in with, you know, identifying areas that you want to spend more time to reflect and learn together, which is standard 10 essentially.
The standard 10 area might be addressed maybe partially through us having a work session where the topic of the work session would be, do we want to overhaul, re-engineer the agenda? What's on it, how much time is spent? So that there were more time for reflecting on district initiatives and looking at some data. You know, rather than spending so much time on routine, is there a way we could do that differently?
Intentionally speed up the routine and create more time.
Change a new, consider changing the
for
routine.
discussion on those other elements.
Yeah.
Well, I'm realizing that what would help me as a board member as we go forward and like with the bond and really needing to have a clear, cohesive community engagement would be more time spent on just what you're talking about, clarifying that strategic plan, linking it clearly to what are we monitoring. And that would help me have a more clear communication as I end up talking to community members, or like right now, I don't feel like I'm really good at putting words around that to have a conversation with somebody. So I would like to work towards building that. I think that would make me more effective.
I will say too, what I tell boards when you do that, and the district goals is really also like your guide for everything. When you're then, if you're informed and you are looking at data and seeing progress of how progress is being made on those district goals, when you're looking at policies, you can use that to keep you, that's to keep you informed, right? So then when you are looking at policies, you're able to make those informed decisions around that. And the budget too. I mentioned the budget as well. When you're looking at the budget, you should be looking for how it ties to the district goals. So that really is also your guide for all your work. Standard, I mean, all the standards are important, but that is really when boards ask us, how do we make the most impact? It's setting the direction for the district. That is your role, and to do that collaboratively and to measure and make sure that progress is being made. Yeah. But there are ways, I will say, to then also incorporate the community engagement piece as well, and to discuss that. And there's a lot, it sounds like there's a lot. So what I would just say is focus on maybe 1 or 2 areas. And if you can all come to agreement on what that is. And then I'm happy to also share kind of some, depending on what areas you pick, give you some additional tools and resources or some actionable steps that you could take to kind of address those areas. Any other board members? I've been hearing a lot from this side of the room. Anyone over here on this side? On this side of the room, I want to make sure, I want to hear everyone's perspectives. And again, if you feel, not to put you on the spot, and if you feel comfortable, but I do always like to ask, everyone to engage.
I feel like, just going off of what you were talking about is the agenda, but I don't really, thinking about the meetings, see anywhere that we could shorten things. I feel like we're pretty quick about the routine things, and everything that kind of takes time during the meetings is pretty important. Like, I love the spotlight. I feel like that gives us a tie to what's happening in the school, and especially when the kids are here, engaging with, I don't remember who the teacher's name was, but I don't know. Thank you. Yeah. I really like that part. I feel like it, and that's where a bulk of the time is spent during the meetings, or reviewing reports and, information that we need. So if we need more time, I feel like we should be scheduling more work sessions, because we don't really do that often. I feel like that's my personal opinion, but I just don't see how we could shorten the meetings without taking out a crucial part.
Okay, so for example, I wouldn't want to lose a student spotlights either. That's too important.
No, I don't.
But I think I would be just as well served with a quarterly report from Chad and Jared and some of these guys. I don't know that needs to be there every month from everybody in every board meeting. I think,
Do you feel like those take up time?
we spend I'm just saying, as far as whatever time we spend on it, we wouldn't have to spend that time reviewing something we would be just as well informed on if we were told quarterly.
Yeah.
Another thing I would share there is that, like, on maintenance reports and technology reports, those things, if we give those to you written, we take less time during the meeting. As you look through your packets, if you have questions, send those to me, and then I can usually answer them, and then you're good, and it doesn't take up meeting time. But then if you don't like the answer, or it's something bigger that needs to come to the meeting, then you have the opportunity to do that. But that is one of the places where we probably could economize a little bit of time during meetings, is if you have questions that are just general, not for the board to decide, but just general questions. You ask me and I can answer them. And then from there, then you've got the information you need to whether the question's been answered and you no longer have a concern or a question, or it is a continuing question that you feel the whole board needs to be aware of, and it becomes board business. Does that make sense? And is that within the guidelines?
Yep. We oftentimes do say as well, there's sometimes so many reports that happen. And again, if those reports aren't informing the board on like the district goals, I'm going to be tying it back to that again, making sure that whatever you're sharing, that information, how it ties back to that vision, to that direction.
Yeah, because there are things in technology that are going to address the needs of us meeting board goals, but there's a lot of nuts and bolts in a technology report that really don't have anything to do with us meeting district goals. It's just sharing what Jared is doing.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
And the same thing with maintenance department. If we're doing some big bond project that's going to help us create a facility for a program, that's one thing. But if we're talking about the fact that 4 of us were on the roof yesterday because we had a leak and had to put a tarp up, that's not something that really impacts district goals, other than it's taken 4 of us away from our day job.
Yeah. Yep, you got it. Yeah, that's exactly it. And then sometimes what I see oftentimes that's getting too much into the weeds, right? And so you want to also make sure you don't need all those extra details. Really focus it on how this is impacting the
And that's
discipline.
what I hear Bob saying is how do we take those things out to
Yeah.
create more time to discuss the things that should be in?
Yeah.
Is that fair? I'm putting words in your mouth.
No, I thought that summarized it nicely.
That just be kind of a new norm for us, that those reports show up in the packet, but our norm isn't that we go through and question them all during the meeting or that we expect a verbal report. We have it. And like you said. if
Unless it's a
questions
big, if it's a big ticket item or something that you're not happy with the decision I've made, then it is definitely appropriate and should be part of what you do. But if it's not, then, it's good information. It helps you understand how the district is running, but it's
Exactly.
not giving you anything towards that higher level, we're
Exactly.
meeting district goals that impact kids.
Right, right. No, I appreciate getting that information for exactly that reason. It gives me insight to things I don't know about, just to understand some of the complexities of day-to-day.
Well, and
life.
a lot of those things, Chad's report, and there's some things that are gonna come up soon because we've got some bigger ticket items we have to fix, but those repairs have big impacts
Yeah.
on budgets. When we have a $70,000 pump we have to buy, it's
Exactly.
not
Yeah,
an
but it's not-
expense we put into the budget every year is, yeah.
Yeah, but it's not like you're not gonna buy the pump.
Right, but we're gonna, exactly, the decision is gonna have to be made, we have to figure out how to do it. But is that something that impacts you as a board? Generally, no, but if it's a 70 grand one, then that's one that is gonna have an impact somewhere in the budget, that's a teacher, right? So, I think those differentiating those things determines what's critical for you all in hearing and understanding to make those goal-oriented decisions as opposed to just informative. But both of those are parts of your jobs, like mine. They talk a lot about, superintendents and principals need to be the instructional leaders and get away from the management portion of things. But the bottom line is that you still have to take care of the management things. You still got to fix the pump, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Sometimes being in the weeds makes me feel like I'm not in the dark. Like, there are parts where I feel like if I'm able to access that and see it, maybe not have questions or dialogue about it and unpack it, you're still able to grasp a portion of what otherwise is a huge amount.
And I would agree with that. I think it's critical and important that you see those things because those are the day-to-day things that make it possible for us to do the pieces with kids. But it's also the day-to-day pieces that get in the way of us doing what we do for kids, and there's no way to get away from it. We have to take care of those things. So you understanding those and being able to share that with the community needs to understand. We're not just babysitting, we also do teach, but there's so many things that come up with all the other things we're asked to do with being doctors and counselors and parents in some cases, we do everything for our kids in our community. And the more you understand that, the more you can share that with patrons who
Absolutely.
are asking questions or have concerns.
Yep. We always say, nobody knows what a board member does, and neither did you before you ran for the board. And that goes for the community as well. The community also sometimes doesn't understand really the role of the board. So that is important for you to know and then be able to share, right, to inform the community. Yep. Yeah, and that goes back to that district goals too. If you create, what I'm hearing really is you all wanting to maybe create a system, like a monitoring plan for the district goals. And from that, you'll be able to also determine how to engage with the community. Because after you get, let's say, what I like to do with boards is after they have a monitoring plan session, which is usually a work session, not during a board business meeting, and kind of hear what progress is being made, having a little plan of, okay, how are we going to now, what are some talking points that we all agree on that can be shared now with the broader community around the progress. So then the community feels informed and knows, oh, wow, all of this is happening at the district. So that's kind of how you can tie that in as well. All right. So from what I'm hearing here, I'm seeing that you want to prioritize standard 1, which is around vision directed planning, but specifically creating a system or a monitoring plan for how the board is going to get progress on the district goals. And then addressing community engagement and maybe carving out time more on how to engage with the community aside from just with the vision directed planning piece. Are those the 2 areas? So standard 1 and standard 2? Seeing
for me.
I think so.
thumbs up from the board. Great. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Do you agree with the areas of strength? So we kind of discussed what areas you want to focus on for improvement, right? Which is these first 2. Which also is going to incorporate this because you're going to set time aside to be able to accomplish that monitoring plan and to be able to define and assess how you're engaging with the community. But what about for areas of strength? Because we want to maintain those as well. Are these the areas you think that are your strengths?
Like, well, you wouldn't want any 3 of those to go away.
Exactly. And honestly, by addressing the areas of growth, you're going to be impacting being an effective leader. For example, standard 3, that is being an effective leader, making sure that you have set a direction, that you are monitoring, that you are holding the system accountable and each other accountable. So essentially these are going to be impacted too. You're going to be improving, right, as you address these areas of growth.
Well, we need to make sure that we maintain those and focus those, but the board conduct and I can't read that last word.
Relationship.
And relationships, I mean, I see that as something that's inherent at this point until we get another board member that comes on and maybe changes dynamics. Or there's always the opportunity that if there's a big ticket discussion item or issue that comes up, that can be divisive too. But for the most part, we keep working together well. Number 1 is going to maintain itself. Budgeting and financial accountability, that's really, there's a great deal that is the board, but that is also a great deal Tara and me making sure that we continue to be financially responsible and transparent and share at every point all the information we can about what we're doing and how we're spending money and demonstrating that it is really any new things or revisions of old things are impacting district goals, which is what we're doing. And then again, the effective leadership, I think that's something that's always there, trying to get to that point. And if you get to that point, then you have to really work to maintain it.
Yep, exactly. Awesome. Well, I did just want to highlight that because again, it is important to maintain those. So thank you. Well, if you have no other questions or comments for me, that's it. I will send you these slides and I will also give you a couple little bullets underneath standard 1 and standard 2. I'll share some examples of monitoring plans and you as a board can then commit to kind of the next steps, right? When are we going to have that to discuss kind of the monitoring plan, et cetera, and carve out some time to do those things.
Jen, is there OSBA guidance, or maybe that's what you just said, you're sending us on how to do the monitoring plan, or is that like a separate training or a webinar or anything that we should be looking at?
Yes, correct. So it is a separate training. I can send you like a sample and then can walk you through it and we can kind of discuss and set up, an agreement if that is what you want to move forward with. Typically, sometimes what I do with boards and what I find as a common practice is I'll do the first monitoring session. We can help, right, develop it and get it all together and help the board prioritize what areas are going to be a part of the monitoring plan. And then we would do the first monitoring plan session so you can see kind of what it looks like and how it's facilitated. And then from there on, you can just replicate it on your own. Typically for monitoring plans, it's a yearly plan and it's quarterly. It's usually quarterly. monitoring work sessions. Yeah. Yeah. Great questions. Any other questions or comments?
Thanks. Shouldn't speak for everybody else. I don't.
Thank
No,
you,
you're
Janet.
good. No, thank you for all your participation. And yeah, I think this is great. And I look forward to continuing to talking with your board and helping you address these areas of growth, of improvement.
Thank you so much for your
Yeah.
time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. It was a pleasure working with you
You
all.
too.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.
Right, so then